And Brian Balakonis here, not back alone, because it's been beat up, but a good Lithuanian and half Irish, so we're good. Well, thank you very much for everything. We're really proud to be here. My name is Brian Balakonis. I'll be the moderator here. I'm with the Society of American Military Engineers, but I'm actually with EnviroVantage. We're an environmental remediation company, offices in New England, Maryland, and me in Puerto Rico. Love it here. Been here since 2018. But very good, and we'll have some questions at the end for the audience, and we do want the audience to really engage in this session here. It's really what we need to have the audience engaged. So all these gentlemen, and thank you for coming here today, appreciate that. They have extensive bios, and if we read all the bios word for word, we'd probably miss happy hour. So they're very overachievers. And I'm going to turn it over to each of them to introduce themselves and their role here in Puerto Rico and go from there. So, Colonel, please.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Colonel Chuck Decker. I'm the commander of the USACE Caribbean District. So, moved here to Puerto Rico and right after Maria. I've been here almost 8 years now. But back in 2023, the Corps was looking at restructuring how they do business here in the Caribbean, and they stood up a task force Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, which we call Task Force Viper because it's such a cool name. And I became the commander of that task force in the summer of 2023, which quickly evolved into a permanent district here in the Caribbean. So we're the newest Caribbean district, or district in USACE, first one in over 50 years. We're small, but we're mighty. We have about 160 employees now. We cover the entire Caribbean, and we have a portfolio of projects that have been authorized, well over $10 billion. So pretty, it's a big program, small team, but one team, one mission, and we're looking to partner and with everyone on the island because we can't do it alone. As far as the Corps goes, just for those that aren't that familiar with our mission set, basically have three main missions. One is building resilient infrastructure. We are the the nation's engineers. We're older than the nation. We just celebrated our 250th anniversary as an organization. So within infrastructure, we do civil works projects, which are largely water related, flood risk management, coastal storm risk management, navigation projects, as well as ecosystem restoration. And then we also are responsible for all military construction, as well as international interagency support. So within military construction, we'll talk more about our microgrids projects, but we also, through our interagency support, have memorandums of understanding with PREPA to help them manage their water assets. So for those that probably familiar, PREPA has the majority of the dams on the island, and so you look at PREPA as a whole. You have Genera, Luma, and they still own their own assets, the dam assets, and we're supporting them in managing those. So the next line of mission set is emergency management. One of our emergency managers here, Johan, we support FEMA in emergencies. We're a big part of ESF3, so we get mission assignments from FEMA to do a temporary emergency power. And also after Fiona, the Corps stood up a task force here, Puerto Rico Power Stabilization Task Force, where we installed 350 megawatts of generation capacity at the Palo Seco and the San Juan power plants. And also part of that task force, we established a $5 billion MATOC to have in our pocket for any future disasters. So third line of effort is and regulatory, and this maybe many people don't realize, but the Corps has an integral part in the regulatory program of the nation. Through the Rivers and Harbors Act, Clean Water Act, we have regulatory authorities to protect waters of the United States. And obviously that's an interesting topic too. It's just discussed through the the National Energy Emergency.
Go ahead, Commander. Well, congratulations again.
Thanks,
now being
Brian.
a commander.
Thanks, Colonel. I appreciate it. Commander Bill Birch. I am what the Coast Guard calls a facility engineer, so I'm the senior civil engineer on island for our footprint. And I think the easiest way to start and explain what the Coast Guard does on island is to talk about our footprint. So We do our surface operations out of San Juan, and we do our air operations out of Aguadilla, which we call Base Barincan. We have a small search and rescue and law enforcement station in Ponce, and we have another small boat station, a detachment that we call out of St. Thomas. So those are our 4 owned facilities where we run operations for the Coast Guard. From a civil engineering stance, we are the mission support for those operators. The Coast Guard does 11 statutory missions, and this is the farthest area south for Eastern Caribbean Coast Guard operations. So with that, we do everything from a very simple maintenance task to facilitate capital construction and mission support from a planning and future construction endeavor. So unlike the Army Corps of Engineers, we're not large enough to have a MILCON per se, but we run through what the Coast Guard calls a PCNI, which is planning and capital infrastructure for construction. So with that, we often have different levels of construction on the island. Some $1 to $3 million maintenance and repair contracts, all the way up to what Juan is going to talk through, which is a post-Hurricane Maria massive rebuild. And currently to date is the largest Coast Guard construction contracts that we have. The next, accounting for inflation as we get through to future projects, the next largest project we'll see in our current career and my lifetime in the Coast Guard will be in Seattle. So it's a pretty major endeavor here in Puerto Rico, and we're pretty excited to be on the front lines of military construction and Coast Guard construction.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Tom, Sam, and Brian with Sammy for extending the opportunity to the Coast Guard to be part of the energy team for Puerto Rico. And I've been here for a little over a year now, and I'm very familiar with the outages. And personally, for the current job that I have a civil engineering background like Commander Birch, and it comes full circle for me pertaining to the hurricane rebuild projects. Like Commander Birch stated, we got supplemental in our funds in the fiscal year 18 following Hurricane Maria. The Coast Guard received over $700 million in supplemental money to rebuild everything that was destroyed. And for me, I was pre-staged in Miami right as Hurricane Maria was striking Puerto Rico. The very next day, we were one of the first airplanes that touched ground on the damaged airport runway, and I immediately started doing damage assessment for the San Juan and Bayamon areas of the Coast Guard facilities. And fast forward 8 years later, I'm back here. I'm getting to manage the construction of those reports and the funding that was given to the Coast Guard. I had a couple of predecessors before me that dealt with the planning and the design of everything that we're rebuilding. I just get to manage the construction, and it takes a decade to get everything done. Hurricane Maria struck in 2017, and our current completion date for the majority of our projects is 2027. The main theme for all of our rebuild efforts is resiliency, and that's resiliency for power and potable water, as well as improving our stormwater system so that we can mitigate the flooding when the next storm comes. And that's, for everyone in this room, we know that that's not a matter of if we're gonna get hit again, but when. And so all of our efforts are geared towards how do we manage the post-storm. And we have 4 sites that I'm currently managing either directly or in Aguadilla. I have a junior project manager that's helping me out on that side. But it's all about resiliency. So in San Juan, we're building a 40,000 square foot multi-mission building, which is going to house the new command center, and that's where we get all the search and rescue and all the law enforcement calls. And if you guys aren't familiar with our footprint, and hopefully you guys, your first interaction won't be on a boat, because if you're needing search and rescue, or you're involved with counter drug, that's not a good thing. But if you see us around, we're in Old San Juan. So at La Puntilla, we have the base there, and like Commander Birch said, that's where we have all of our boats, and that's where my main project is, the multi-mission building, which will include a water tank to provide 10 days of potable water for the entire base, as well as generators and fuel tanks for 10 days of power in case we lose that. Similar deal with our housing in Bayamon. We currently have clusters that have small generators, and we're consolidating all that with two large generators to house, to basically provide backup power for the entire community. It's about 150 houses of Coast Guard families that, after our project, will have backup power and water again for 10 days. In Ponce, we have a joint project with a CBP, where it's another multi-mission building, and we have a small unit there that does inspections. And that's also a hurricane rebuild, with the addition of increasing the seismic capacity of the building from 2020 earthquake that damaged that old building. So the new one's going to have improved seismic capabilities as well. On the west side of the island, we have another major rebuild. Like Commander Birch stated, to date, these have been the largest awards for the Coast Guard. One in San Juan, and the other one was in Aguadilla. And same deal with Aguadilla. More power, more potable water, very large storm water improvements, and that's been a challenge with bedrock. We're building on a cliff, so we have to dig up a lot of rock there. But that's basically it. I'm very happy to hear all the progress that you all in a collaborative effort are making, and know that the Coast Guard, we're also becoming more resilient. We're becoming building better, and making that investment in Puerto Rico. So our Puerto Rican families in the Coast Guard are going to have more resilient buildings.
Thank you, everybody. Sam, Tom, thanks for having me. I'm Lieutenant Colonel John Borland. I'm actually still active duty within the Special Operations Command, but I'm up here not in uniform because I'm doing an internship with a telecommunications company called Fidelity that basically looks at the intersection of security with respect to water, fuel, and data. And those things come together. And like we've heard the last couple of days, to be having that continuity of operations has been critical in order to build a better ecosystem for your businesses. So that's basically what I spent the last roughly 8 years doing within the Special Operations community. I was responsible for all the resiliency on our home front so we could project forces out, but I was also responsible for that same type of resiliency when we go off the forward operating bases and looking at ways in which we can secure not only what we need to sustain life, but what we need to do in order to be effective fighting the new fight. The modern fight is not dissimilar from the modern business, where data, AI, and the ability to sustain that backbone is vitally important. From there, it made me look at who deploys best in the world. And as much as I'd love to say it's the military, and I know we're recorded, so we'll just clip this part out, but often it's oil and gas, it's people that are going out to make money. Oil and gas, remote construction, underwater, or Arctic construction, and then space engineering. And so I started reaching out to those groups and tried to integrate them into what I'm doing right now. So I've spent the last roughly 2 years and up until the end of my career pushing forward with modular nuclear power, and also pushing forward with the integration of space construction and remote construction within the SOCOM umbrella. So I'm really interested in all those intersections. And coming down to Puerto Rico, I love the last couple days of conversation because so many of the problems that y'all are trying to solve are absolutely the problems that we encounter day to day. So that's both exciting that a lot of people are trying to tackle them. It's also exciting because it means there's probably a job after I'm out of the military. But I definitely think there's room to collaborate, especially as mentioned earlier today, both in the regulatory bodies as well as some of the funding that's coming out and some of the executive orders are shaking loose certain things. I know I'm excited about it on the nuclear front, but there's a variety of other issues. And I think if we collaborate both with what we're doing as well as what the Corps and some of those other entities are doing and speak the same language, we can kind of start to move this thing and be more effective.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Colonel Decker here, and please kind of elaborate on your microgrid project here in Puerto Rico, and also your interaction with LUMA and PREPA with some of the projects that are currently doing in Puerto Rico itself.
Yep, definitely. So before I jump into some of our microgrid projects, so I do want to touch on, I mentioned civil works, flood risk management, coastal storm risk management. There's a lot of resiliency that we add through those projects as well. So when we're putting in a channelization project or a levee project, and we're touching existing utilities that are old, outdated, we upgrade that infrastructure to current codes and standards. So there is a lot of resiliency that comes out of that, and we have a lot more civil works projects going on in Puerto Rico than we do military construction microgrids. So a lot of benefit comes out of those. On the microgrid side, the DoD kind of approaches installations. They've done studies over the years, installation energy and water programs, and looking at how they to make installations more self-sufficient, resilient, and sustain operations in emergencies and whatnot. So within Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, there are no active duty Army units. So it's Puerto Rico Army National Guard, Puerto Rico Air National Guard, the U.S. Army Reserve, and then Virgin Islands National Guards as well. So we support the Army Reserve primarily, and that includes Fort Buchanan. So we work very closely with Fort Buchanan on their microgrid projects. They have several projects, as well as water projects, so rain harvesting and water and wastewater treatment projects to make that installation more resilient. We also have microgrid projects going on Puerto Nuevo Reserve Center, our Reserve Center in Juana Diaz, and our Reserve Center in Ramey. So we can talk maybe a little bit more about opportunities for improvement, but the way those projects have developed, and like was mentioned, these are multi-year process. They're pretty much focused on how the DoD meeting the DoD's needs, and not so much how that serves the community. And I think there's plenty of room for opportunity on how we plan and execute our projects so that we can provide a win-win, not just for the DoD, but also for the communities that those installations are serving. On another aspect of our energy program, I mentioned the MOAs with PREPA. So on their water assets, we are rehabilitating the Guayataca Dam, which many may be familiar, that almost failed catastrophically during Maria. So we stabilized that immediately, and now we're working on the long-term permanent repairs. And we'll also supporting PREPA with Batias and the Guayabal dams. And I think there's opportunity in through a separate MOA we have with PREPA with the water assets in terms of dredging and hydro power. I think there's also opportunity to get the most value out of the water assets that we have. Not just from flood risk perspective, but drinking water, irrigation, power, recreation, the whole gamut. And I do want to say we have a good great relationship with LUMA as well. So we're partnered with LUMA. Anytime that we have a project that connects to or impacts the grid, we have to work through their endorsement process. And we're close to having an MOA with them as well, so that we can streamline and fast pace some of our projects in terms of microgrids and utilities that we're touching.
Thank you very much, Colonel. Turn over to the Coast Guard and talk about your projects and your interactions with the utility, and do you rely on LUMA as
Sure, I might
others?
give Juan the opportunity for the utility side, but I'd like to build on what the Colonel was talking about, which we often talk about project drivers, and I find that my job here as a regional engineer is to say to an operator or to a neighbor or to another agency, hey, why is this project being built in this fashion? And so one of the first SAMI Lunch and Learn presentations we hosted was a joint presentation from our then project manager and our design build firm, which was Perini. And we talked about how did we get to groundbreaking and what are the project drivers, the code compliance, the raising of elevations for storm surge. And so why does this building that we're building on the waterfront look very different than the building that we built in 1950, right? So explaining that and understanding what the definition of resiliency means for this project is to say that the emergency operations can continue. And sure, is it a 3-day continuation? Is it a 5-day? Well, we ultimately landed on a 10-day surge to say this facility needs to continue to operate, needs to be able to take calls, whether it's law enforcement, search and rescue, whatever the case may be. And it's important, and Juan and I talk about it, Brian and I talk about it offline a little bit too, is like not to forget why the design is going in this direction. And that's really one of the most important facets, right? Codes change, and we need to build the current compliance. And that's really what we see, especially we're fortunate that we have such great partners when we're building to the tune of $400 million under 4 or 5 different design build contracts that, did we get the project drivers correct at the RFP, and did the RFP get to award, and then now that we're in construction, are we working through all the construction challenges where something is simple to a geotechnical engineer that says, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that we need to reinforce the soil adjacent to the bulkhead when we're going to build a 3-story structure. Most people on base have no idea what we're doing. It's a really unique opportunity to see some large scale construction. So.
Well, for the utility question, I'll say we've had a great relationship with Luma as well. Right when I got here, I went to the headquarters, I think in Santurce or around there, and met with some top management because we have a challenging situation on the West Coast where we have to make improvements. But by making the improvements on our facilities, we're also affecting the upgrades that need to happen on the outside of our fence line, literally for Luma, right? And so it's been a long process, but it's been Luma has been very cooperative in trying to get to a yes, and that's in between all the challenges that they have for the island in the middle of hurricane season. And actually for our projects here in Old San Juan, whenever we need to shut power out to the base, Commander Birch has a direct line where he's like, hey, can you make sure someone's here to shut down power at 7? Yes, we'll be there. And it happens pretty smoothly. So for all the headaches of losing power, I think Luma is doing pretty well. At least for us, we've had a great relationship. And I will also say, really like who you know and your level of familiarity with how things get done in Puerto Rico shows, at least from our end, between prime contractor and prime contractor, where we're doing the same type of work, but one prime gets all the permits done and is ready to go for construction, and the other seems to not know how to get through OCPE or talk to the right people, and it's the same type of work. So I would encourage everyone to really pull the strings that here in Puerto Rico to progress, and with the current administration. There's a lot of encouragement to get things done quick and creatively, and so I would encourage everyone to try to find a way to yes, because it's more impactful if you can get things done quicker and show an actionable thing that you accomplish by creatively bypassing some things if you know the right people. And here in Puerto Rico, I think if you know the right people, you'll get things done quicker.
That was not recorded, by the way.
Legally, everything.
There's plenty of caveats. You're fine. John, you want to just talk a little bit more about your studies of small modular
Oh, certainly.
reactors, please?
One of the things I think I heard is the idea of islanding, and no pun intended because we're on an island, but the ability to continue to do operations even once everything else has been shut down. And for where I come from as a response to crisis globally, like we have that responsibility to be able to pick up the phone no matter what happened. And if nothing else, a couple of the power outages that made national news, as well as what we know people are doing in the cyber arena, it means we're vulnerable, and we might not even be able to recover as quickly as we think we can due to a lot of singular points of failure. So what happened is you start looking at what does nuclear do for you when other things like oil and gas or your pipelines get knocked out. What can you do with nuclear? Basically, you can turn it on, you can produce your own fuel, you can produce your own water, and you can truly island. And you can island not just for 20, 30, 60 days. Like you can do it for years at a time. And what that enables us to do, and COVID taught us this, is it allows us to have those supply lines stand back up. So a large part of the push is not just, hey, a different source of power, although we love power diversity and the microgrid that we're building out, has solar panels, has other more gas tanks, diesel. I think we have natural gas as well. We have a good amount of fuel diversity, but what nuclear does is it allows us to, if everything else is turned off, we can still self-sustain an island for a substantial period of time. So it's a completely new capability, both stateside, but also when we look to deploy, most of the casualties over the last 20 years have been moving liquid logistics. So most of our soldiers have died or been wounded moving liquid logistics. If we can get these reactors forward, we can eliminate that, which is huge. The other part of it is we also have gone, and I think it was alluded to with respect to some regulatory bodies and how, we've spent a lot of time consolidating that for economic reasons to large power suppliers that are doing both the power, the storage, and the distribution. One of these things is that creates vulnerabilities in that our distribution lines are so huge and they can be attacked from adversaries. So as we start to harden back and look at microgridding, we need to be able to do that in a way that we can isolate any of the attack portions of the grid so that we can still be effective in both military response, but I'd also offer so that any type of adversarial attack would not be as detrimental to the economics of whatever area is attacked.
Great. At this time, I think we're going to give the panelists a break and see if anyone in the audience has any questions. Sam.
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody on the panel for being here, and thank you, Brian, for moderating. One of my key questions is, what does the military's response to both its energy needs as well as its ability to respond to off-base energy needs, how do we extrapolate from that for private industry or for other entities that are trying to make themselves more resilient?
This may not be the exact answer to that question, but it kind of dovetails into something that I wanted to further expand upon is opportunities for improvement. I think that I've noticed kind of fall under the master planning umbrella. I mentioned that we've got Puerto Rico National Guard, Army Reserve. They're different components, and even within the DoD, they don't necessarily talk well together or plan well together. So the Army Reserve Command is pushing more statewide master planning, and I think there's lots of opportunity there, not just for military installations, but for the the entire power grid here in Puerto Rico. So master planning as well as collaborative. I think there's opportunities for AI applications, collaborative AI, specifically getting diverse groups together and coming up with solutions that are implementable. And then just partnerships. For us, like I mentioned, we're 160 people in the district, and we have to leverage partnerships, and getting everyone working together efficiently is our, I would say it's a strength, but it's it's an opportunity too. Is how can we really make a huge impact here? I would say better planning, better execution, and we can solve all our problems.
That's a good point. And Colonel, I'd add too from a perspective that every division within the service, with all 6 branches, are always in some iteration of modernizing. Whatever that modernization looks like at that moment in time, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's a physical asset or a piece of equipment. And so there's this fine line between complete resiliency and efficiency and flat out not turning off the lights. And so we rely on the industry partnerships in order to, get the next level of technology within our organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's one of the things that industry partners can absolutely help us with is help us be better customers. Help us better understand what technologies are out there and so that we can advocate along with you as we further develop them. And then the nuclear phase, we're not as cost sensitive. When we're talking about national security or lives, we're willing to pay a little bit of a premium to, in the instance of nuclear, reawake a 30-year-old industry that just hasn't been awake. I go to nuclear conferences fairly frequently, and I often see, I'm 41, I'm the old guy of the young group, and then there's people 70 plus are on the other side of it, and that's what I see at these conferences. We've been asleep at the wheel for nuclear for a long time, and it's a very, very good option to go with. But right now, the military, the Army, with the next generation reactors, we're buying down that first N of one cost. So where we need to be partnering with industry is get the book of business for, I'm agnostic to which supplier, but like we need to be building these things back so we can catch up with China, Russia, and those other industries that have gotten their nuclear reactors, some of them with our designs, continuing to just churn them out. And so we are far, far behind, but with industry partners, we can start to push forward on that.
So I have another question. I have several questions, but I don't want to be the only one asking questions. So if you do have interest in asking a question, Francisco, I see your hand up. Anybody else, I can bring the microphone around, Brian. Thinking about parallels with industry, what is the, and maybe the Coast Guard and USACE have different approaches and the Army have different approaches to this, but what's the preferred model to developing a microgrid on a base? Do you own the asset? Do you work with a partner and it's more of a PPOA model? What's the preference in terms of how you engage with the actual generation facility?
I'd say traditionally it's been very DoD internal demands and needs, but that's where I think I was saying there's opportunity to look at public-private partnerships. There's if there's reserve centers or installations that have additional real estate that we can lease to a private entity that wants to build a microgrid to also supply power to the community. I think those kind of options are out there, and something that we can explore. I think the example of isolated planning is all of the microgrids that we're building now are not net metered. They're we're one way, and could that capability be added down the road? Likely, but it's not just as easy as it may sound. You can't throw a piece of equipment on there and flip a switch. Sometimes a tie-in is a mile away. So those kind of things I think could have been thought through earlier, and through that collaboration and planning and master planning, we can come up with a better solution that meets everyone's needs. There's obviously cybersecurity issues and to deal with, but I think if the DoD approaches these type of projects as a member of the community, which we are, and we proudly serve the communities that we everywhere around the nation, around the world that we serve. So we need to be more engaging of that community's needs and how we can better how we can be a better member of that.
I agree, sir. From the Coast Guard side, the framework exists to have, we're probably never going to own our own nuclear grid, but the framework exists for that public-private partnership. On island, we have a Schneider Electric ESPC, Energy Savings Performance Contract. We've metered, we've got PV arrays. We have a combination of owned property, leased property. We often engage with industry and partnerships. So we would probably, as a smaller entity, follow the DoD's lead and look to take USACE and the Army at a grander scale and follow in suit.
Yeah, the same thoughts about creativeness and for For the project in Ponce, we have it's the first interagency deal with CBP and Coast Guard, where it's Coast Guard land. I'm managing the construction, but CBP's funding the project, and then they'll own the building, but it's on Coast Guard property. So I believe that a similar situation can be applied towards something with the community for building a microgrid and federal property, but then the community gets a benefit given that all the security measures are taken care of. It's possible. It's definitely possible. And I wanted to add to the last question about just diversifying with nuclear. I think there may be some public misconception or education that needs to be had for what nuclear can really provide, and as well as the biomethane. That's definitely a great option. I think anything that can be done to augment the capacity of energy supply is good. Like diversifying the type of energy production for the entire grid.
Number one, thank you for your service to all of you. Appreciate it very much. God knows that it's a difficult and strange time right now when it comes to military. So, hope the best for you. We were somewhat involved in the process for the microgrid project in Hernán Pesquera in Juana Díaz. And I believe that there's been some changes to that. So my question is, when it comes to political decisions and how that affects the projects that the military has, particularly in energy, we talk about fusion and that sort of technology, but those changes, when you already have contracts or the intention to move forward with a project, and then suddenly because of changes in politics, those things change, and that affects local small businesses. Is there any plan to see how that can, be enhanced, or ways to, alleviate the perhaps the effects to the small businesses that are actually are looking forward to those type of projects, which doesn't happen often, especially here in Puerto Rico?
Well, so I can speak from experience where there's a shift in a political decision that happened to me for Bayamon, where it was an Inflation Reduction Act of funding. And because of the change in administration, the project was already awarded, and I was already built for the first $1 million of design. And then the order came that, hey, every IRA funded project is on hold now. And so that it comes from the top down, and I had to wait until basically they cleared the project again for execution. And for DHS, we've had the S1 approval, not necessarily tied to energy, but based on a monetary, anything 100K has to get straight approval from DHS, and that's put a hold on my world, because anything over 100K, I have to wait until Secretary Noem signs off on it. And so I don't know. It's top down from the military, so my bosses are doing everything that they can to push and streamline. And how do we get to yes, so that we don't affect the small business owners? And what I try to do from my end is be as honest as possible and give the latest information and be truthful as to how soon I can expect the construction to resume.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to your question, and we're a completely non-political organization. So sometimes we get told to do things that we just have to go do. But I think one thing the Corps is trying to do a better job is, it's actually this quote is mine from a book on how big things get done, is plan slow, execute fast, and more collaborative, contracting on the execution side. So I think, I was talking about master planning and getting, community engagement, and when we're scoping out our projects, especially on the civil works side, spend the time up front to really get the scope, the project scope right before we get a chief's report or a Milcon project that includes, community and small business contractor, involvement up front, so that, we've taken the time to make sure everyone's aligned on what we're going to actually do, and then get the money and execute as fast as possible, because it's the delay from, it's the long, the 10-year process to get something built that causes a lot of problems, because a lot of this is not the same. Yeah, so as the project's, moving along and you get new people on it, they sometimes forget the original intent by the time we get to building it. So I think some of the microgrid projects could have been optimized and better serve the community. But on the collaborative contracting side, traditionally, we do a lot of design bid build or a two-phase design build. So getting contractors involved early on, design build to budget, progressive design build, integrated design and construction, so that the team that's going to build it is involved in the final design as well, will help accelerate. And having a keen understanding of the end user's requirements and never losing sight of that along the line will help as well, which we can get in the planning phase. But we get a lot of feedback from our military customers that we're building Taj Mahals, and they need something that they're going to fight out of tomorrow. They don't really care about it. It's going to last 50 years or whatever. So the end user, we should be designing and building for purpose, and make sure that we really understand the purpose, so that we're investing the right amount of money into it and the right amount of time and the right standards that we have to design to.
All right, based on the time frame here, we're going to wrap this up. How about a round of applause for the panel here, please? We're going to get a photo op here first before we leave the stage, and there'll be more access to the panel. They may change outfits for happy hour, so recognize their faces now.
Happy hour won't be.
The happy hour is not recorded, apparently. Apparently.
Let's jump in there for